Hi there, this is Nick, and today we are going to see a brief summary of the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is understood as a foundational book of the Bible, laying the groundwork for all redemptive history. It's not merely a collection of ancient stories, but a divinely inspired revelation of God's character, His plan for man, and the origin of key theological concepts. Now, the sovereign, we see Genesis chapter 1 to 2, the sovereign creation of God. Genesis opens with God as the triune sovereign creator, speaking the universe into existence. Example, the Hebrew phrase Yeshi Me Ayin, translated to out of nothing or from nothing in English. He creates an orderly cosmos and culminates with the creation of humanity. Adam and Eve, in his own image, was created, and we see endowing them the righteousness, knowledge, and the true holiness, and commissioning them to exercise dominion over the earth as his representatives. The highlights God's absolute power, wisdom, and goodness. Now we see the fall and its consequences. Genesis chapter 3, the most important chapter introduced when it comes to sin, the fall of man through Adam's disobedience to God's command, tempted by Satan. Adam and Eve rebel against God and leading them to original sin that entered the human race, corrupting human nature and passing down to all descendants. There was guilt and condemnation for the whole human race because everybody sinned. They all became guilty before the holy God. There was total depravity. Every aspect of human nature is affected by sin, though not its absolute worst extent. There was broken relationship. Fellowship with God was broken, leading to a spiritual death. There was curse on the creation. The entire created order is subjected to futility and decay. The proto-evangelism, it's derived from the Greek words protos, means first, evangelion means good news, refers to Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. In the midst of the judgment, God immediately provides a promise of redemption. You find this in Genesis 3:15, foretelling of coming of the Messiah through the seed of a woman who will crush the head of the serpent, foreshadowing Christ's victory over sin and death. The spread of sin and God's judgment, you find this in Genesis chapter 4 to 11. Following the fall, rapid growth of sin. And this is the evidence you can see Cain's murder of Abel, the increasing violence and depravity before the flood and the Tower of Babel. This demonstrates the devastating effects of the inherited sin and humanity's inability to save itself. God's response with righteous judgment, the flood, the confusion of the tongues, but also consistently preserves a remnant of grace through Noah and Seth's lineage. The covenant with Abraham, Genesis chapter 12 to 15, this marks a new phase in God's redemptive plan, shifting from a universal scope to a particular chosen people. God, in His sovereign grace, calls Abraham, later Abraham, and establishes a unilateral, unconditional covenant with him. Key aspects includes the promise of land, the seed, the blessing. God promises Abraham a vast land, innumerable descendants who will become a great nation, and that through his seed all the families of the earth will be blessed, pointing to Jesus Christ. election and particular redemption. This covenant highlights God's sovereign election of a people for himself through whom he will bring about salvation. Faith as the means of justification. Abraham was justified by faith, becoming the father of all who believe. Then you see the narrative follows unfolding the covenant through Isaac, Jacob. He was renamed Israel, and his 12 sons. Despite their flaws and weaknesses and struggles, God faithfully preserves his covenant promises. And we see the sovereign providence. God's hand is clearly seen in guiding and preserving his chosen people. Most notably, the story of Joseph, where what was intended for evil, God uses for good. Find this in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, to preserve a remnant and set the stage for the book of Exodus. In summary, Genesis is not just an ancient history book, it's the theological bedrock that teaches about God's absolute sovereignty in his creation and salvation, the radical nature of man, human sin, total depravity, the certainty of divine judgment of God, and most importantly, the gracious initiation of God's covenant of grace, promising a Redeemer who would ultimately restore all that was lost in the fall and bring about a new creation, a new testament. It sets the stage for the entire biblical narrative, anticipating the person and the work of Jesus Christ. I hope you will subscribe to this channel, and if you like it, you will hear more of this in time to come. And may God bless you, may God keep you and protect you. In Jesus' name.